You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Well, it's a very good morning to you, and Supreme Court Judge David Ashton-Lewis is just sliding into third base on his chair. He's just get it into the studios.
I just have to get a glass of water.
Well, we've got a great little show today, our second one back. And, and we were talking last week about your time in Fiji, David.
Yes.
And we moved into the idea of being part of the Commonwealth. Now, Australia's been part of the Commonwealth for a very long time. I don't even remember a time.
We weren't. We were
always.
We first remember the Commonwealth was the British Empire.
Yes.
And it consisted of all the nations, or the empire, that Britain had, if you like, governed. Had like India, Pakistan, a number of nations in Africa. And then after the Second World War, when nations such as India and Pakistan got independence, they, like Fiji, got independence in 1970. The name changed to the Commonwealth of Nations. And the Commonwealth of Nations are those nations, again, that were governed, in some cases ruled, by the British. And thus the monarch, the king, King George VI, the Queen, was the head of state in those countries and also head of the Commonwealth. So until 1987, Queen Elizabeth was the head of state of Fiji. We focus on that.
So the question, I've turned myself down. The question that we were discussing on and off air was, once a country has had a military coup or a coup of some sort, it is automatically out of the Commonwealth, correct?
Yes, it gets excluded, yes.
So, and you were mentioning that Fiji potentially may like to be back part of the Commonwealth. So the question is, what are the benefits of being part of the Commonwealth?
Well, that's now being asked by many. There's rumblings of getting rid of the Commonwealth Games, that they are really past their use-by date. Now, the Commonwealth Games, well, I don't think I need to explain them. They were like the Olympic Games, but only for the 56 members of the Commonwealth would send teams and would compete. Now, those games tended to be dominated by Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. And then India became very strong. And so people are saying, well, what's the point of them? Because tiny places like Bermuda and the Bahamas, they can't compete against the best that Australia put up, because what Australia, Canada and New Zealand tend to put up for the Commonwealth Games is people who are good enough from those countries for the Olympic Games. Now, but the benefit of the Commonwealth was that it had things like secretariats dealing with health, opportunities, particularly in the last 10, 15 years, the role of women and the advancement of women's life in studies, in economics, in universities. So the Commonwealth was something more than just the Commonwealth Games. It was reasonably good at promoting itself, but it sort of slipped back a bit on that. So, of course, being in the Commonwealth got benefits. If you were a small country and you needed aid or assistance, now aid not necessarily in dollars and cents, but aid in the sense of teacher training, not first aid, but nurse aids. Other Commonwealth countries, including the big ones, would come in and provide that training and that aid. That still goes on today, so I would be surprised to see the demise of the Commonwealth, because unlike the Spanish, the Dutch, the French, the British were able to keep the groups of nations that had been governed them under their empire and were not hated. Thus, India, for instance, is a very good Commonwealth member. Now, India could have said in, February 1947, We don't want anything more to do with you, English. Get out. Same with Pakistan, same with Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Sierra Leone, South Africa. South Africa's been in and out of the Commonwealth.
And that's a great observation that they were kept. As you say, if you were treated poorly, you'd say we want nothing more to do with you.
Yeah. Well, people will remember I was a guest of the Soviet government in 1986, and I had to speak. I was invited to speak to the Soviet Academy of Sciences, their Institute of State and Law in the Kremlin, and I did. And the one thing the Russians were really interested in, how have the British had such a vast empire and then freed states, and yet they all want to join and let this little white English woman be the head of the Commonwealth? And why didn't they all run a mile away? Now, the Russians, if you remember when we've done shows on this, were interested because they knew their Soviet empire was coming to a collapse. Now, there were 15 republics in the Soviet Union, and we're seeing a war being fought now because Russia believes Ukraine is just Russian. Ukrainians, I don't know any listeners, you go and ask most Ukrainians you ever meet, are you Russian? They will say, definitely not. Like if you meet Macedonians and say, oh, you're Greeks, they'll virtually pick up a rock and hit you with it. So I think that the whole British Empire thing, there was cruelty in it. There was bad things in it, but there was more good in it. And that was reflected by the fact, I think there are now about 52 nations or 49, I haven't checked, still in the Commonwealth. And only I think 11 of those nations now have the King Charles, as head of state. And of course, the three big ones are Canada, Australia and New Zealand. But Bermuda, Bahamas, St. Kitts, I think, has. Belize doesn't. Belize was British Honduras.
So we can see the benefit here. If you're a smaller country, if you're a smaller state, you get the benefits of saying, hey, can you give us a bit of a hand here?
Yes, you do.
And you do get a hand. It's big brother helping out little brother.
Yeah, well, it gives a hand, exactly what you're saying. So those little small states like Belize, if they need help, can say to Canada, look, we need help. And if Canada says, oh, yeah, but so does everyone else, Belize is able to say, but we are brother members of the Commonwealth.
Sure.
And that does carry weight.
Is there something to be discovered in the meaning of the name, Commonwealth?
Well, it really just, as it says, it's a common wealth. People come together. Some of the American states are the Commonwealth of Virginia,
yes,
for instance. And it was just that there was an area of land that was called, or they named in the I think Virginia was one of the first states, so it's probably about 1779, 1780, and said that there is a commonality of wealth. We are Virginians. And so then each of those colonies, as they were up until the War of Independence, each of those colonies had a British governor. And so they were able to rely on their cohesion. And then, of course, when the War of Independence came, they became states. Those 13 colonies became the 13 states of the Union, thus the United States of America. And it's no different to how we have our name, the Commonwealth of Australia. We are common, and whether you live at the far top end of Queensland, up in the Cape, or the bottom of Hobart, Tasmania, we share a commonality, and thus, and we've talked about this in the past, how Tasmania with 502,000 people,
yes,
and the big states, but Tasmania gets treated equally. And they've always had, and I haven't checked whether, I think it's still happening, Tasmania always had equalisation because you had to get things to Tasmania via a sea journey a lot. And so that Tasmanians couldn't be hit with paying more than what a Victorian would pay for something. And they still don't. I mean, there's equalisation. So there is the commonality of wealth.
Gotcha.
It is a commonwealth.
So let me pose this question, David. So moving back to the Commonwealth, the bigger states, the bigger countries, what benefit is there for them?
Well, you mean like Canada, Australia, New Zealand? It gives to me, others might not agree with this, but it gives Canada, Australia, New Zealand a seniority in international affairs, that they are the three big boys in this former British Empire, along with the UK, but we'll keep the UK out. They are the three big children or big boys of this once great empire. And it doesn't include the United States. I understand there has been talks in the past of admitting the United States to the Commonwealth, because you don't have to be, again, a country that the monarch is the head of state. There's a president of India, a prime minister of India, etc. Same with the African countries. And I think it's never got very far, because people have said, for heaven's sake, can we have something without the Yanks?
Well, that's probably fairly fair at times. Look, they have their benefits. They have their shortcomings, as everybody else does.
As everybody does.
Moving back to Fiji, you were saying to me, and as part of this discussion, that they obviously are now no longer part of the Commonwealth due to the coups that have occurred there in the past. But the current government were considering talking to the UK about becoming part of the Commonwealth once again. So obviously there is some merit in being part of the Commonwealth again, or the country is poorer for not being part of the Commonwealth.
I think you're right. I think that's a good way to state it. There's a certain credibility in being a child of a once great empire and retaining the governance of that mother country, parliamentary democracy, the rule of law, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of thought. Now, sadly, because of modern leftism, if you like, modern wokeism, things like freedom of speech are under serious challenge.
Yes.
Freedom of association are under serious challenge. And we will be the poorer for it if we ever lose those things. Now, I think we should do a show on Fabianism, the Fabian Society. The Fabian Society are really modern-day Marxist-Leninists. And I was quite surprised to hear that virtually 99% of the current Labour Party in Britain are members of the Fabian Society, and I do know that Anthony Albanese, as a young university student, was an adherent to the Fabian Society. And the Fabian Society, what's that? I've gone blank on the North German name.
And something.
They really expressed Fabianism. Fabianism was really in the 1880s, and it was this North German university in 1926 produced their manifesto, which basically...
Forgive me, mate.
I've forgotten too, and I apologise to the listener, but we have done a show on it. Fabianism advocates the abolition of the family, the abolition of... so if you have children, children belong to everyone, and the family have no greater say in the abolition of religion and the abolition of anything other than a one-party state. And the state is to provide everything for you. And we know, history has shown us, when you try to make the state the only party and the sole provider of everything, standards go down, corruption rises, and the amount of waffle and lies told by these people, how good it is. Well, I spent time in the Soviet Union, and I saw, after from 1917 to 1986, how decrepit the place was because no one owned anything. The state owned everything. And that meant your individuality, your dignity, your ability to try and do better was simply neutralised.
And that's the battle in itself. Well, it reads very well, and it sounds like this wonderful little
utopia.
Fairy tale. Yes, but when put into normal practice, you've forgotten the normal human condition. We strive to do better. We strive for things. We look at the next door neighbour who's got a shiny new car and say, I would like something like that too.
And so you will save harder, or you will strive harder.
Or I'll go and learn more, or become better educated. Making everybody equal means that, well, I don't have to try. I just do what the bloke next door does, and I get exactly the same thing.
Look, honestly, people aren't equal. They're not equal in talent. They're not equal in intellect. They're equal in terms of law and human rights,
yes,
of course. But if you don't take into account someone's a brilliant AFL player. And I've known people who wanted to play AFL and played good at an amateur level but could never make the professional level.
Yes.
Now, that's not putting one person down less. It's just that, well, you haven't got that skill.
That's correct.
I knew people who just wanted to study medicine and they never made the cut into a medical faculty. I knew the same with law. They never made the cut into a law school. And so we're not equal. That's the different thing. And good government, utilitarian government, which is the basis of Western liberal democracies, says, that's all right, we can accept that. You strive to do your best at whatever, and if it's to be the best plumber or the best road worker, then we will make sure that you can be that. But we can't control minds that says, oh, being a surgeon is everything, being a road worker is just nothing. Now, any listener out there can say that type of view in life is wrong.
Correct.
All work is worthwhile.
That's right.
And to those who are given much, such as the surgeon or the judge, much more is asked of you.
And the issue is that you find that most people's focuses are on, well, I won't say most people, but are on those sort of successes. But when you boil it all down and you talk, you have a look at religion, you have a look at the Dalai Lama, it's about happiness.
Yeah. Look, they're just another job. I've been blessed in my working life, and I'm still sitting on a Supreme Court. But the bottom line is, it's just another job. That's what it is. It's nothing more, nothing less. Now, sure, a free democratic society puts accolades on that and not on being a sort of refuse worker. But push that aside. They're just other jobs.
That's right.
You work to the best of your ability. And so, look, Fabianism is a danger, and yet we are caught up in the age of that because one of the things, look how we've been fighting battles that doctors don't have to consult parents when they start giving an 8-year-old a hormone. Because that little 8-year-old says, I'm a girl.
Look, it's funny, isn't it, that there are a number of things that are under attack. And to me, those sort of things, but wokeists, you should be able to open up a microphone or have a conversation down the street and talk about an unpopular topic.
You should.
And explore that topic, but not be shouted down with, you're a racist. Stop
you're
talking about
or you're Islamophobic.
Stop talking about that now.
As you know, I teach at a university, and I had a young university girl come and say to me, you were so lucky, David, when you were studying in the 1960s and 70s, that you were in a place that encouraged critical thinking. Now, at university, unless I write along the accepted lines of the school, I won't name the school of study, it wasn't law, and unless I write along the lines of that particular professor or lecturer, I'll be cancelled. I won't pass papers. Now, when I thought, what? that you writing a paper, when I think of the assignments I had to write, 2,000 and 3,000 word assignments through all subjects. Law in my day was 21 subjects over 4 years. And you had to do assignments in about 12 of them, and then you had to write end-of-year papers for the rest. And to think that I would have been forced to write, I will listen carefully to my lecturer or my professor and think, now I better write something that he or she will like.
Yeah, well, look, that's been there since day dot. You discovered whether your lecturer was someone who wanted you to think freely,
yes,
or someone who wanted to regurgitate, and that's how you got a good mark.
Well, look, I must admit I was lucky because about 3/4 of my professors and lecturers challenged us and said, OK, I want to see your thoughts, not repeating what I've taught you.
Look, we forget at times, and again, we should be bearing this in the forefront of our minds, especially with social media and the World Wide Web, that when we read something, it is someone's point of view more often than not, and a good example is the Bible. We weren't there 2,000 years ago, but this is someone's point of view that has been pushed forward 2,000 years.
Yeah, well, look, I was speaking to a group yesterday, and they asked me if I would speak on climate change. And I said, no, I prefer not to speak on that because it's a vexed topic.
It is.
And it, at the moment, is under the aegis, under the control of basically the left. And that anyone who dares say, well, I don't know about this, even to the extent of saying, I accept that there's climate change, but I'm not happy with the way it's being dealt with in Western developed countries. It's interfering and damaging economic stance and that. And the moment you say something like that, you're a climate change denier. And you want to say, did you not listen to my words? I said, I agree that there is climate change, but I do not agree with massive countryside having big, massive propellers turning everywhere. I don't agree with that. And so then you'd say, that's not climate denier, that's saying there is climate change. Because, look, there has always been climate change. How many times?
Yes, there has.
And I did say yesterday, how many peer-reviewed papers have you read supporting climate change? And the questioner said, a lot. And I said, how many peer-reviewed papers have you read denying the way that it's being handled? The answer was, a lot. And I said, well, that's interesting. Where did you find them? Because at the moment, it's very hard to find very high-ranking peer-reviewed papers questioning the modern-day approach to climate change. Now, again, as we've said over many shows, since the end of the Second World War, we've lived in the age of social democracy. And therefore, I think if you tend to be conservative in your views, you're considered far right. Now, when I was growing up, far right was the Nazis, Adolf Hitler.
That's right.
So language becomes important.
It does.
And again, under wokeism, language has no value whatsoever unless it is agreement language.
Yes,
you agree. Right. And that's a shame upon us.
Yes.
There should be critical thinking and debate.
And that's one of the big things. When did being wrong become a cardinal sin? Because that's what it actually appears to be nowadays.
That is a good way to put it, Colin. When is being wrong a cardinal sin? Like I saw an American commentator being hammered by pro-Hamas people and saying how Jewish attacks are killing children and men and women. And he said, of course, it's called war. And are you honestly saying that in war you must only kill soldiers?
Yes, that's right.
We've never had a war where we've only just killed soldiers.
Look, I've said this one many times on the show and many times around the building. I remember reading in my younger years, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. And forgive me, I can't remember how many attempts he had at doing so, but let's just take the round number. It was something like 47.
Yep.
And one of the journalists at the time said, how does it feel to have 47 failures before you succeeded? And he looked at the journalist and said, oh, I didn't fail 47 times. I had 47 opportunities to learn something.
Yes, very true.
And it comes down to that point of view, doesn't it?
Yep, it does.
All right, well, we're at the end of the program, David. That was very, very quick.
Today, hasn't it? Yeah.
All right, well, thank you very much for your time again. We look forward to your company again next week. It's been a while since I've been able to say those things.
Thank you, Colin. Yes, look, it's just a joy to be back. And I hope for those who we might offend occasionally, forgive us. We're trying to encourage alternative thought. We're trying to encourage then think opposite to what the majority are thinking. There's no shame in that. There's no wrong in that.
Until next week, David.
Yes.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4crb.com.